Let's not waste any time. This is my top 10 films of 2019. 10 to 6, I'm gonna briefly skim through because I want to focus on the top 5, but before that I want to cover some honorable mentions. High Life just about missed out on my top 10. I do love the occasional abstract / surreal art piece, but I've never really found one that I've properly fallen in love with. This is about as close as I've gotten. It's truly gorgeous and fairly interesting throughout. It just loses my attention in a few places. It's hard for me not to mention Joker. Joaquin Phoenix is truly outstanding in this piece. He's at the top of his game. I'm mentioning this simply because of the ingenuity on display. It's a fairly low budget film about making a low budget program for a TV network that's one continuous take. The amazing thing about this is that it starts with that 30-minute continuous shot. Anybody that knows me would know that I'm a massive Tarantino fan, so it might seem a bit bizarre to only have this at number 10, but this is his most self-indulgent and mature film so far, which is both a blessing and a curse. Take from that what you will. Jake Gyllenhaal is superb as Mysterio. Tom Holland once again proves that he is the best Spider-Man out there, and Zendaya is a pretty good MJ. This film was the perfect palate cleanser after Endgame. I didn't expect to enjoy this as much as I did. It's a wonderful concept, executed pretty well. Samara Weaving is an absolute star. Eat the rich. I've been struggling for a while to explain properly why I enjoyed this film so much. I think it's down to the chemistry between our two leads, and I'm just a big Shia LaBeouf fan in general. And the fact that this film is kind of about wrestling in some way hits a bit of a soft spot. So yeah, this is a fairly fitting finale. I mean, it has its issues, but so does the entirety of the MCU. It's just hard to argue about the cultural impact that this whole universe has had on the medium and pop culture in general, even if that means pissing off some of the old heads in film. A Triple Threat by Jim Cummings. He wrote, directed, and starred as the lead in this wonderful tale of grief. In my initial review, I also theorized that this is a pretty good look at this idea of toxic masculinity. Let me explain myself. Jim struggles to deal with the loss of his mother, and it's made all that more difficult because he can't seem to actually talk to anybody about how he feels and what he's going through. And instead of, opening it up and actually dealing with it, it kind of comes out in anger and a lot of other negative traits because I guess he feels he has to be this stoic man and bottle everything up, which obviously is an ideal that's often linked with conventional masculinity. It's one thing to attempt what Jim does. It's another thing entirely to execute it to such a high standard and to do some of the most important and key scenes in slow, continuous zoom shots. That takes bravery. This may be one of the least talked about films I've seen this year, so if you can find it, it's on UK Netflix, I know that much, please watch it. I remember hearing about this due to its somewhat controversial existence. I mean, anyone that casts Mel Gibson as a character that's seemingly out of time and holds some pretty dubious viewpoints is kind of asking for it. But anyone that watches this will appreciate that despite his place as one of our protagonists, we're not led to believe he's a good guy. We're not even asked to agree with him. That goes for all of the characters in the film. None of them are particularly good people. It's like morally grey to the max. What we're asked to do is understand why they think the way they think and why they do the things they do, which is a pretty human thing to ask. I mean, the same goes for its casualness when it comes to discussing race. It's not taking a stand, it's not presenting an ideology, it's just presenting something that's real. And narratively, it's not really giving us anything that's groundbreaking, but it's a structure that I've always been pretty fond of and it's executed fairly well in this film. Add to that some great cinematography and again, a willingness to let stuff play out in a single shot instead of cutting constantly, and you get this. If you've seen my top 10 films of 2019, you'll remember that I gave top spot to Damien Chazelle's Neil Armstrong biopic, First Man. Well, Apollo 11 is a documentary that covers the mission that that film kind of concludes with. This is essentially a collage of archival footage images and audio recordings from the event that does so much more than just present the facts of one of the most important moments in history. It truly captures a moment in time and allows us to live it out as if we were there. Documentary is one of those formats that I've never really found a piece that connects with me quite like a film would. This does though. Simply, the placement in the list should explain to you the effect that Apollo 11 had on me. Shia LaBeouf is a guy I've always had a weird appreciation and fondness for, and he's gone through his fair share of issues this decade especially, but it seems that he's coming out the other side in a pretty positive place, and that's a good thing. Honey Boy is a tale somewhat based on Shia's life, and more specifically the relationship he had with his father growing up and the things he went through. The story follows Otis, who's essentially a stand-in for Shia, as he reaches rock bottom at 22. He is sent to rehab, court-mandated rehab, and starts therapy there. Through this therapy, we are taken back in time to when he was 12 years old and shown his life. In the film, Otis is played by two different actors, Lucas Hedge and Noah Jupe. Both are tremendous in their separate roles, and Shia plays his father, and again, he's just great. Pardon me a sec while I potentially butcher this name, and I apologize for it profusely, but this is Alma Har'el's first feature film, and if there's anything to go by, I'm gonna keep an eye on anything she does in the future. I might actually go back and look at her documentaries, despite the fact that I mentioned not hugely fond on them. But to tell a story this difficult and so close to especially Shia with heart, and to make it like enjoyable viewing, there's no words for it. It's a great film. It was honestly a toss-up between this and my actual top spot. I was excited for the release of this film for quite a while, but if I'm being entirely honest with you, I did not expect it to place highly in this list. So the fact that it's at number 1 is a testament to just how damn good it is. Scorsese has never been a director that's been on my Mount Rushmore, despite the fact that I enjoyed all the films that I had seen from him previously. But with The Irishman, we find a director at the peak of his craft, a tale from the oh-so-familiar territory of organized crime. However, this time, the glitz and the glam are gone. This is a sad, sad film. Over the near 3.5-hour runtime, we witness Frank Sheeran lose everybody and everything in his life. Whether it's consequences for his own actions or the inevitable reality that awaits us all, death. And that's ultimately what this film is about. Scorsese is confronting mortality, whether that be his own or just the general concept of death and life. In doing so, he created a monument of moving image. This is cinema. And that's going to wrap it up for my top 10 films of 2019. I know last year I mentioned the worst film I had watched, but I'm not going to do that this year because nothing was like as dreadful as the Cloverfield Paradox was, so I'm not going to put anybody on blast. Anyway, most of the films, if not all of the films mentioned in this video, I have covered in my Letterboxd Highlights series, which you'll find elsewhere on the channel. It's a playlist. Go watch them all if you want to hear about some other films I watched in the past year that weren't released this year. If you're more of a written word person, you can find all my reviews on Letterboxd in the link in the description. And that's going to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed film in 2019. If you haven't seen some of these films, go out your way to watch them, because I wouldn't mention them if I didn't think they were great. And yeah, as usual, love film.